going to talk about the New Deal and resettlement communities. So there were, during the New Deal, a lot of, farmers were in horrible situations, literally starving on their farms, which weren't producing. One of the ideas the New Deal had was that we'll resettle them. We'll take them where the land isn't good and we will move them somewhere else. You can see a lot of them were farm communities, but there were some non-farm communities. Um, and that people were moving people from one location wherever there was problems to another location. And there was an actual resettlement administration, the RA. It worked in conjunction with the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, FARA, as well as the Farm Security Agency, the FSA. And you can see here, the one we're going to talk about today is the one all the way up here in Alaska, the Matanuska Valley. And they came from these three states, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Now, one of the reasons for choosing this was that they were obviously decided that, hey, they would probably have a fairly similar, you know, uh, lifestyle. These are similar states. Hopefully, farming would be similar, um, and that they would be able to use it. Another reason is this was particularly hard hit. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute. Now, when they picked the Matanuska Valley, they had several locations. You can see here the Kuskokwim Valley, the Big Sioux, Kodiak Island. They had all these different ones where like, hey, we could potential settlement areas. Now, the Matanuska Valley was chosen for its suitability for farming, which a lot of these also had, but also for its proximity to Anchorage, which is already a fairly large town. The idea that they could then sell their produce there, as well as the fact it was on the Alaska Railroad line. There was no road between Anchorage and the Matanuska Valley at this point, but there was the rail line, and so you could get people there as well as supplies fairly regularly. And one of the first tasks they're going to undertake is obviously in the first year is getting a road built from the Matanuska Valley to Anchorage. Now, when they chose settlers, they had fairly specific guidelines. They were supposed to have farm experience. They were supposed to be able to pass a rigorous physical examination. They weren't supposed to have any major diseases or handicaps. Secondary skills were also given consideration, but this was supposed to be very secondary to farm experience. Obviously, you need stuff like blacksmiths and teachers, and they're going to bring in teachers, but blacksmiths, things like that. But first and foremost, they wanted farmers. They also wanted people who had a pioneering mentality and skill, and they wanted parents between 25 and 35. In other words, putting people on here who are in the prime age to farm this, and they're going to produce families that are going to stay and grow. The states, so Minnesota, Michigan, and Wisconsin, are the ones who are actually choosing the colonists, and they don't do a very good job of adhering to these guidelines. When they get the colonists to Alaska, they realize that many of them don't fit these requirements. A lot of them don't have farm experience. And a lot of people are much older than anticipated or handicapped in some way, that makes them unsuitable for farming. Now this is where the colonists came from. There was 202 original families chosen. Some are going to leave and some are going to get replaced. But that original 200 number was the goal. Now you can see here that they're fairly spread out between the three states. This dotted line here, this is the cutover region. And what this is, and this is another view of the same cutover region. From the 1850s on, this had been heavy logging country. And so this area was heavily logged. Now the issue here is logging was by the 1920s petering out. This was a problem for several reasons. First of all, it was a big secondary income. A lot of people were farming and logging, and those two incomes were combining to sustain their families. The other reason is when they decided, well, what do we do with this cleared land? Well, hey, let's sell it to farmers. Turned out, though, the land wasn't very good. And so when the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl hits, you've got farmers, often inexperienced farmers, on land that they bought, um, and that it's not very good to start with. And so they're really in this hard place of that they'd lost their secondary income, and then, okay, we're trying to just farm, but it's going to take several years and a lot of good farming experience to get this land productive. Well, they don't have that time. So this was an especially hard hit area. And so that's the reason that these states were chosen, as well as, of course, that suitability between climates that they were helping would help out. Now, once those families got there, they drew lots. They pretty much drew their farms. Now you can see here, this is the city of Palmer right here, um, and then Matanuska Junction, and then over here is going to be approximately where Wasilla is today. And that, they're trying to spread out these so that they're fairly close. And that so that the farms are all in that same area. Now, in 1935, so the colonists start arriving in May, and between June 1st and November 1st, and they'd actually brought in itinerant workers from California and Washington to help build this. They get 154 homes built, 117 wells dug. They have a commissary, power plant, warehouse, garage, and teacher and nurse dorms. The school and the gymnasium weren't finished, but they were undercover. They'd started a hospital, and they had staff housing nearly done. It's pretty good productivity. Now they're pretty lucky. It's a pretty late winter, and so they've managed to get the colonists inside. Now they've, of course, in tents this entire time, but obviously they wanted them in houses before winter really hit. This is a 1938 picture of a colony farm, and you can see they were given 5 choices of what their farmhouse would look like, and barns were all built exactly the same. Things like a chicken coop and all that were part of it. And so that the idea being by 1938, we've got pretty nice looking farms. Now there's a lot of discontent though among the colonists. First of all, you've got a lot of people who came who really weren't suitable and either left or were sent back. But then the AARC membership was required. It wasn't a choice. And you weren't given a choice on who to sell your produce to, or even what price to sell it for. And then even if you say you wanted to sell your land, wanted to sell some of it, you had to be approved by the AARC. Now eventually, after several years of haggling, they were able to get this amended. But this was a major source of discontent. Like, hey, we came up here to own our own land, to sell our produce, and now you're saying that we have to do this. They're not too happy with the regimentation that's happening. There's also this debt adjustment that happens. Now, these farms weren't free. When you got your house built, when you got your livestock, this was all tallied up, and you had to pay that money back. It wasn't free. They weren't given a farm. The issue being that they decide that they're going to do a debt adjustment and they're going to kind of give a discount. What they end up doing is just taking 50% of everyone's debt off. The issue, though, is for the families who really were careful with their spending, they didn't take more than they need, they didn't have that large of debt. And so, yeah, it's great that half of it's gone away. But if you owed $4,000 and down to $2,000, oh, cool. But what if someone owed $20,000 and now down to $10,000? And the thing, though, is they got all that stuff that went along with taking that extra debt. And so, yeah, they still have $10,000 to pay off. Well, you only have $2,000, but they have a lot of extra stuff that they got pretty much for free. This is the community center as of 1936. And so you can see here, they've got all these different things, the school, the administration building. This is a pretty nice little town that's appearing, and this is only a year later. So, pretty good progress on the community itself. Now, this is cleared land as of 1941. So, obviously, the idea being that put them here and we'll immediately start selling to anchors. That, of course, doesn't work. And it's going to take much longer to establish farms and be able to sell. It's not until 1943 that the colony is producing enough that they're really able to sell excess to Anchorage and start really making a good profit. Fort Richardson in between 1940 and 1948, that's actually going to increase another tenfold. Some of that is there's a military base now in Anchorage, Fort Richardson, and they're going to be able to sell to them as well. But you can see there the amount of cleared land really has went up. The question was this a success or failure? It cost 5 times as much as they anticipated. There was a lot of bad PR at different times, but in 1930 there was 400 people in the Matanuska Valley. There was in 1940 3,000, and they were by 1940. It took a little past 1940, 1943, but by 1948 they're selling a lot of stuff. So it took longer than they thought, but you do see some good successes. Of course, there's many people though who gave up and went back, and those could be considered failures as well. Now, when you just look at a picture, though, this is a 1939 aerial picture of Palmer. And so this is 39. You can see nice little town kind of, I don't know why that went like that. Not that one. There we go. Nice little town, fairly big cleared land, all the little homesteads, the nice little, nice little town appearing in there. So this is Palmer in 1938. This is Palmer in 2019. This is Google Earth. And you can see that this is quite the, it's not a sprawling metropolis by any stretch of the imagination, but it's certainly a nice, huge city, cleared land. You can see it's got an airport out in the corner, roads everywhere, and there's still some farms left if you start looking around. There's definitely farming. A lot of the farming still done in Alaska is done in the Matanuska Valley. So, this in itself is a picture of, they wanted settlers, they wanted the valley to grow. That certainly happened with this. So really, it comes down to how you're going to judge it. Are you going to judge it by the people who left and gave up? Or are you going to judge it by the people who stayed? And it's not just the people who stayed, but obviously because they stayed, more people are going to come in the following years and join those original colonists and start expanding out. You're going to see continuing homesteading throughout the next decade or two as more and more people come. And of course, the military base is going to bring in more as well.